Welcome, everyone. I'm Susan Stark. I am the Program Director for League of Women Voters of Denver, and I am a member of the Executive Committee of CSLC. That probably will give you an idea about why we're partnering together on this ballot issues briefing tonight. So in case you're familiar with only one of these organizations, I'll say a few words about each one's mission. The League of Women Voters is the local branch of the League of Women Voters of the U.S. There are 18 local league branches throughout Colorado. The League of Women Voters of Denver, established in 1932, is an unusual organization, nonpartisan, grassroots, and multi-issue. That is a recognized force in our community. As a nonpartisan organization, it encourages informed and active participation in government and influences public policy through education and advocacy. League's goals are to establish positions on public policy through members' discussions and agreement, to influence public policies consistent with League's positions, to monitor governmental bodies and commissions, to encourage citizen involvement in local, state, and national government decisions, and to promote participation in the electoral process. The Colorado Social Legislation Committee was founded in 1971 to bring together individuals and organizations interested in the broad issue of how human needs are being addressed by Colorado's legislature. This is an all-volunteer organization, and it follows bills that address such issues as access to health care, homelessness and housing affordability, child care, renters' rights, mental health care, LGBTQ rights, and other causes. CSLC invites panels of legislators and stakeholders to discuss upcoming initiatives. Members then vote to support or oppose legislation, and our opinion is sent to the legislature. CSLC's meetings are open to everyone, but membership is appreciated. Between these two organizations, citizens can access excellent information about local and state issues and gain insight into the pieces of legislation being proposed by our senators and representatives. League of Women Voters holds at least one briefing a month from September through May on Tuesday evenings, and CSLC holds a panel discussion every Monday beginning January 8th this year, in 2024, from noon to 1:30 during the legislative session. Both organizations post videos of their Zoom meetings on their websites. All this is free and open to anyone, but if you like what you see and hear, I know CSLC and League of Women Voters would appreciate your becoming a member to help us to continue educating citizens and encouraging participation in democracy. League's next two briefings are at 5:30, I believe, on Tuesday, October 17th. This one is on ranked choice voting. It will be in person at Montview Presbyterian Church. And on November 14th, via Zoom, we'll have a briefing on human trafficking and Alight, which is a local organization which offers pro bono legal services to victims of trafficking. Tonight's speakers will discuss Denver's referred measure 2P and Colorado's Proposition II and HH. Please post your questions to the chat, and League's Pearl Ann Zalarny will facilitate a Q&A after the presentation is finished. I would now like to introduce Lisa Haddix, Chair of League's Voter Service Committee, who will provide information about tonight's topics and presenters. Lisa.
Thank you, Sue. Just to hop back to the agenda really quickly, Sue and I have a little bit of general information to share with you, and we'll go over the local Denver issue first, which is Measure 2P, and then we'll go over the two state issues, Proposition II and HH, and we're doing 2P and II next to each other because those two both have to do with preschool, both at the local and the state level. And then we will, Proline will facilitate questions, as Sue said, and then Sue and I both have some closing remarks at the end. And we envision this will take about an hour or maybe a little more, kind of depending on questions that we get at the end. I forgot to mention I am chair of the Denver Voter Service Committee, and we're always looking for people. That's why I'm talking to you tonight. I have a role in this presentation, so please consider that for the future. I'd like to introduce our two speakers tonight. Lis Brown will talk on Denver Measure 2P. Lis says she's been a 50-odd year member of the league. She was treasurer for the Denver League of Women Voters for 9 years. She was treasurer of the State League of Women Voters for 2 years. And she was on the Denver League of Women Voters Denver Education Committee during the tumultuous DPS, Denver Public Schools busing years. Our second speaker, Geoff Withers, who will go over the two state issues. Geoff's worked in the Division of Local Government for 25 years, providing technical assistance statewide to local governments and managing various statutory local government programs, including the property tax limitation that was first put into law way back in 1913. Geoff has a master's degree in public administration and is a member of the League of Women Voters Denver and belongs to the Observatory Park Unit. And just one item before we get started with the presentation for the local issue, which is called 2P. It just so happens this year that all the measures we're voting on, the three of them, the one local and the two state, are referred measures. But just keep this in your hip pocket for next year, or maybe you remember from last year, but referred measures or referendums are referred by a legislative body, and in Denver, that's the city council. It's referred to citizens for a vote. Versus an initiative, which is a proposal by citizens who've gathered the required number of signatures. And that number of signatures varies every year or two based on the number of voters that are in Denver. I believe it's 2%. So let's get started. And Lis Brown will tell us about Measure 2P for the Denver Preschool Program.
Liz, you're probably going to have to unmute.
Now I'm not muted, right?
Okay. Yep, you're not muted.
Okay. All right. The Denver Preschool Program. 2P is an ordinance removing the December 31st, 2026 expiration date of the existing 0.15% sales and use tax dedicated to funding the Denver Preschool Program and extending the tax until such authority is altered or repealed. This is subject to the approval of the voters at a special municipal election to be conducted on November 7th in coordination with the state general election. The Denver Preschool Program was established in 2006 when voters approved a 0.12% sales tax to fund a preschool program for Denver's 4-year-old children. It featured a sliding fee that makes the program affordable for all Denver families, yet which still emphasized quality and quality improvement. At that time, the sunset date was 2016. In 2014, voters approved extending funding for the program until 2026, as well as increasing the sales tax to 0.15%. The 2014 measure also provided for raising the cap on administrative expenses from 5% to 7% of preschool tax revenue received by the corporation in any year. The program has been administered by the Denver Preschool Program, DPP, a nonprofit corporation, and has been successful in offering families in the city and county of Denver high-quality preschool. In its 17 years, the program has helped 65,000 Denver children attend preschool, double the national average. In 2022, for example, there were 4,706 kids in the program. The major provisions are With no expiration date on the dedicated tax, the Denver Preschool Program will be able to continue with no disruption to the pre-kindergarten education of the designated population of Denver's preschool children. The Denver Preschool Tax will fund Denver residents only without an increase in taxes. But in addition, the Colorado state funding this is from the EE, which precedes the II, nicotine tax. The Denver Preschool Program will also manage the new Colorado Universal Preschool Program that is designated for Denver children. Each area in the state has their own designated children. Okay, this will help to expand our pilot program for 3-year-olds. The Denver Preschool Program Fund provides scholarships that cover all costs for lowest incomes families and helps with tuition for many other low-income families. Those in favor say, the Denver Preschool Program, first passed by Denver voters in 2006 and reauthorized in 2014, has served more than 65,000 of Denver's children. In 2022, DPP awarded Denver families more than $18.3 million in tuition credits to attend the preschool program of their choice. In addition to investing in Denver's families, DPP also invests in helping our local preschools improve their quality. And during COVID, DPP provided stipends to preschool educators across Denver, helping ensure that childcare businesses and educators could weather the crisis. The Denver Preschool Program is open to all Denver families, with those who need it most receiving the highest level of support. DPP's partnership with Colorado's Universal Pre-K program will make Denver's dollars stretch even further. All Colorado 4-year-olds are eligible for 15 hours a week of state-funded UPK. The Denver Preschool Program helps Denver families cover much of the remaining costs, which allows parents and caregivers the time to go to work or school. Children with access to high-quality preschool are better prepared for kindergarten, read earlier, and graduate from high school at higher rates. Without increasing taxes, we can continue this important investment in our city's greatest asset, our children. Sorry. And there's no known opposition to this measure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liz. Now we'll move on to covering the 2 state measures, Proposition II and HH. And we're going to switch PowerPoint presentations now. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and Geoff Withers will share his screen.
There, can you see the blue screen?
We
Yes.
can, it looks good.
Okay, good. Well, the second, we're presenting these in the reverse order for that you will see them on the ballot. So the second measure on the ballot is the, oh wait, now, why can't I? Here we go, this is better. Okay. The second measure on the ballot, oh, this isn't, this is not, there we go. I don't know what I just did. Somehow the screw them. Well, okay, we'll get this. We'll get this going here. The second measure on the ballot for this November's election is Proposition II, entitled Retain Nicotine Tax Revenue in Excess of the Blue Book Estimate. This measure was referred to the voters by the state legislature, and somehow my screen keeps batting around here. I don't know why.
It looks fine on here, but you haven't advanced if you were planning to advance your screen.
Well, okay, see if it stays there now. During this section, I'll provide an overview of Proposition II and talk about what your vote means and the impact it'll have on tax rates and revenue retention. All right. Back in 2020, you may recall, under Proposition EE, the voters approved a tax on cigarettes, tobacco, and other nicotine products. In the first year of this tax, the state collected more revenue than the state estimated in the Legislative Council Blue Book. No, this is doing it. I can't. There's something about the screen sharing that's not working with my notes here, so I think I'll have to switch them around a little bit. I'm sorry. Sorry to. I can move this over here. That's what I can do. Okay. Currently, the well, let's see, I say this, the excess revenue, where did I stop? The Council Blue Book. The excess revenue was mostly due to tax revenue from nicotine products, such as e-cigarettes and vaping products, which was a new tax. Currently, the Colorado Constitution and the law requires the state to refund the excess revenue to wholesalers and distributors of tobacco and nicotine products and permanently reduce the tax rate on these products, or alternatively, ask the voters to allow the state to keep all the revenue collected from the new tax, which is what Proposition II proposes to do. A summary of the measure is that Proposition II would use about $23 million, over $20 million, but about 23 now, already collected in nicotine and tobacco taxes for preschool programs, rather than refunding this revenue to the tobacco wholesalers and distributors. What your vote means is, well, a yes vote, I guess I should say, on Proposition II allows the state to keep and spend the $23 million in tax revenue that's already been collected and to maintain the current tax rates on those products. The tax revenue will be spent on preschool programs only. A no vote on Proposition II means that over $20 million, the $23 million will be refunded to wholesalers and distributors of cigarettes, tobacco products, and nicotine products, and tax rates on those products will be reduced to prevent an overage in the future. So what you see here is a chart that outlines what the tax rates were before EE passed and after EE passed, and it shows also the progression of the, oh, what did I do now? Sorry to switch screens on you again. It'll show you what it is, the 6 months of, the first 6 months of 2024 will be a different level of tax, and then it increases until 2027 and stops changing after that. So if Proposition II passes, the nicotine products will stay at the previously approved rates and future tax rates. And then they'll see an increase above that too from II. So if Proposition II fails, the taxes will be reduced by 11.53% to prevent that overage. So it's kind of the II puts this tax on top of the EE tax. The EE tax stays there. It remains in place. It's a little complicated. The impact on revenue collected from the tax will be, no, I'm sorry, we're talking about the collected already from the tax in the first year was $208 million, or 21.5 million more than the estimate that the voters approved in 2020. Thus, the excess revenue of $20 million has grown with interest now that it hasn't been spent. If Proposition II passes, the state will keep and spend over $23 million along with the future revenue collected by maintaining the tax rates previously approved by the voters under Proposition EE and the new increase over Proposition II. Excuse me. Tax revenues will be used to support the Universal Free Preschool Program, which provides part-day preschool programming to all children in the year before kindergarten and 3 or 4 year-old children with disabilities, and for low-income families and at-risk children. For the current year, the 23-24 budget in the state, spending will increase by the amount of the Tabor refund, plus the increase in state revenue, which totals $38.1 million. The math of this is all a little wonky, so that's enough said about that, I think. Then it'll increase in the next year by the $32 million that is expected from the future increase in taxes on cigarettes, tobacco products, and nicotine products. So to summarize, Proposition II would use over $20 million already collected in nicotine tobacco taxes for preschool programs rather than refunding this revenue to nicotine and tobacco wholesalers and distributors. Stop here for questions.
There is one question in. So if Proposition II is not approved, does the tax from Proposition EE remain until its sundown date in 2027?
Yes, it does.
Any other questions? You can also have questions at the end, but this seems like a reasonable place to talk preschool if anybody has any questions.
I think
have a
this is a
question.
wonderful proposal, and I hope that it passes. And thank you, Geoff, for a very comprehensive report. It's helped me immensely.
Good.
Yes,
Thank
Geoff?
you.
I have a question that I didn't know. I sent it to someone directly rather than to everyone. I'm sorry, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. It's just that, so the title of the proposition does not say anything, does not include the word preschool, is that correct?
That's correct. It's strictly a tax measure. And well, no, I should say tax and also giving permission to the state to keep and spend
Right.
money. That's in the. Mhm.
Yeah.
That's all required by Tabor.
Jolynn, did you want to
Yeah.
ask a question?
Who is for and who is against? Is there any particular organizations for or against?
There are a number of organizations for. I don't know who's against, and I don't have a list of the 4 organizations to say the truth. I don't know of anybody that is against it, but I don't have a list of the ones that are supporting it.
The tobacco companies, I suspect. Yeah, it would be.
Well, yeah, they're against it, I'm sure. I don't know. I don't know if they have a lobbying group.
And the distributors, because they stand to gain a lot of money back.
Right.
Can I say that the Denver Preschool is for it? Not
Yes.
officially.
I think there are a number
Yes,
of
it's very critical to their plans.
So a comment that CSPC is for it. Good to know. And does II add funds to the Denver Preschool Program?
Through the state program, kids that come through the kids that are allotted to Denver from the state program. Does that make sense?
They're bringing that money with them. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yes.
Sorry. And check the chat because it is also a good place to share things. And there's a summit that there's a text about. And many childcare providers are for it, listed on the website.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions in chat before we leave preschool, all things preschool?
The answer to that question is yes.
Oh, do DPS preschool ECE programs get funds from this program?
Right. They'll get it with the kids that are given to the DPP from the state preschool program, the UPK.
So we can still ask questions about preschool at the end if you like, but Geoff, do you want to do the next one? Start the next one?
Yeah. This one's a little more complicated. Let's Proposition HH is entitled. First of all, it is listed first on the ballot, and it will be, I should say, when you get the ballot. But the title is to reduce property taxes and retain state revenue. Sounds simple, but it's pretty complex. And I'll try to hit the high points. I'll talk about the measure, overview of the measure, and then again, what the vote means and what the impact will have on property taxes, tax refunds, and revenue if the measure passes. Proposition HH would relieve property owners of some of the increase in property tax bills that you'll be getting next year for this tax year, where property taxes are complicated. There's one tax year is spread out over about 3-4 years, so there's a lot of terminology that is kind of jargon, really. But this measure was referred to the voters by the state legislature and requires a simple majority vote to pass. As an overview, let's just start with Proposition H. Oops, let's see. There we go. It cuts property tax payments for owners of homes and businesses for at least 10 years compared to what would be owed if current levels remain. Also, Proposition HH will establish limits on tax revenue growth for most local governments with a mechanism to waive the new limit, which I think would be used very rarely. The state can retain some revenue from the TABOR refunds, some additional revenue from the TABOR refunds that would otherwise be refunded, which will be spent on education, sent to local governments to offset their property tax revenue reductions, and fund rental assistance programs. So there are only 3 purposes that it can be used for. The senior homestead exemption will be made portable when seniors move. It's also made retroactive. So if you had a senior homestead exemption in the past and moved, perhaps to downsize, you can go back and claim that exemption again in your new place without having to live there for 10 years, starting in this tax year. Taxpayer Bill of Rights, that is TABOR refunds for individuals, will be reduced compared to current law and equalized for the 2023 tax year, which we're in right now. And so next year's equalization will be like last year's. You remember that that last year we all received a check for $750, I think, and that was an anomaly. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. But what your vote means, a yes vote on Proposition HH lowers property taxes owed, allows the state to keep additional revenue that would otherwise be refunded to taxpayers under Tabor, temporarily changes how taxpayer Tabor refunds are distributed, and creates a new property tax revenue limit for most local governments. So it does quite a few things. A vote no on Proposition HH would maintain the current law for property taxes, Tabor refunds, and state and local government property tax revenue limits. Let's see now. I'm gonna count up. Got too many. I've got 3 images on 2 monitors in front of me, so I'm bouncing around a little bit here. Pardon me, please. So only local governments collect property taxes. There is no state property tax. Tabor prohibited it in 1993. Property taxes are paid on a portion of a property's value that is known technically in the law as assessed value. Many people call it taxable value. So the actual value of a property is discounted down to a much smaller amount, especially residential, much smaller amount for tax purposes. Property values have increased significantly in most areas of the state, resulting in the threat of higher property taxes owed. Proposition HH lowers the property taxes owed by property owners compared to what would be owed without the measure. The impact on an individual property owner obviously depends upon the type of property you have and the value of the property, as well as the tax rates for the local government where the property is located. And in many parts of the state, not so much in Denver, but around the state, there are many overlapping jurisdictions of local governments that levy property taxes, so it gets complicated. This chart shows the average property tax impact for owner-occupied and multifamily properties if Proposition HH passes. Oh, come on now. Stop that. And now I can't move my picture. There it is. This shows, for example, a property that is valued at $350,000. Your tax bill could be no, wait a minute. I'm sorry. This is the one that I wanted. Sorry about that. This shows, this chart shows if you're a property that is worth $350,000, your tax bill could be lowered by between $179 and $239 in 2023, which is the tax year that we're in right now. In 2024, it goes up. And then beginning in 2025, where we don't have projections for that, they don't go beyond 2 years in projecting tax revenues like that. But beginning in 2025, there will be a smaller reduction. At least that's the estimate right now. And please note, these property tax savings will depend upon whether or not local governments don't do anything to change their revenue limits. Either the limits created by Proposition HH, they could do it, especially most of them would do it with an election. So that's possible still. The impact on state revenue retention, which is part of the ballot issue. and Proposition HH creates a new cap that of the amount of money the state may retain and spend. It's higher than the current cap that was established by voters when referendum C was passed in 2005, if you remember that one. Proposition HH allows the state to retain additional revenue up to the new cap, which grows annually by population growth and inflation plus 1% per year. The measure allows the state to retain an estimated $170 million in state budget year 2023 to 24, which we're in right now, and $360 million in 24-25. Those are state fiscal years. The state can, retain after to retain revenue after 2032 without further voter approval if assessed value behaves and doesn't and decreases equivalent to what the measure HH requires. Otherwise, it will the revenue cap for the state will revert back to the current Tabor calculations that Ref C put into it. Now, where the money goes, the retained revenue will be used to reimburse local governments and school districts for lost property tax revenue as a result of this measure. Up to 20% can be used for reimbursing eligible local governments for losses in their property tax due to the measure. Secondly, up to $20 million each year can be used for rental assistance. And the remaining funds will go to school districts. The impact on Tabor refunds is something that everybody wants to know about. The Colorado Constitution and law includes a section, as you know, called the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, commonly called Tabor, limiting the amount of money that the state government can collect and spend or save every year. Voter approval is required to retain money above the Tabor limit. And if the money is collected, if there is money collected above the limit, the excess must be refunded to taxpayers. And this we're calling a Tabor refund. Under current law, Tabor refunds to taxpayers are typically distributed through the state income tax. The exception was last year when we all got a check. If Proposition HH passes for the 2023 tax year, refunds will be distributed in an equal amount for each taxpayer as they were last year, estimated at about $900 for single filers and about $1,800 for joint filers. The actual amounts will depend upon final state revenue when they close the books on last year. This measure's impact on Tabor refunds over the long term depends upon population growth, inflation, and state revenue collections. If the state doesn't enact any future policy changes, state revenue collections are largely driven strictly by economic activity. This chart shows again well, this I already said that. As an example, I guess in 2024, your refund is expected to decrease by $42 if your income is between $52,000 and $103,000. And it is obviously going to be higher in the higher incomes, but it's a smaller percentage of their income. So it's a progressively imposed benefit. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to click that yet. And this also shows come on now, Geoff, the refunds that will occur in 2025 in the same fashion. Each year, the Tabor refunds will be determined in one of three ways, depending on the level of state revenue. And here are the scenarios. The first scenario is when the state revenue exceeds the Proposition HH cap, this new cap that it will put in, and Tabor refunds will decrease. The second scenario is that state revenue exceeds the new Proposition HH. No, and I'm sorry, I'm getting lost looking back and forth between the two monitors here. When state revenue exceeds the referendum C cap, then Tabor refunds would be eliminated because they'll all be taken up by the money that the state would retain. And then scenario 3 would be when state revenue falls below the current Ref C cap, there will be no Tabor refunds because there will be no excess revenue to refund. Now, I have to point out that this little chart here is not really proportionately designed. It's just to try to make a picture out of how the stacking goes of these refunds. That's all. The local government impact is also complicated. Cities, towns, counties, school districts, and many special districts collect property taxes to fund public schools and local services such as road maintenance, police departments, fire protection, water and sewer infrastructure, parks and libraries, and many other things. Due to the new property tax revenue limit and reduced property taxes, if Proposition H passes, revenue for local governments will decrease compared to what governments are authorized to collect under current law. Some of the reductions will be partially offset through reimbursements from the state. Not all local governments. Let's see if I can move this again. I'm sorry. There it is. Not all local governments that collect property taxes are treated the same by Proposition H. And let's look at the differences. Slide 23. Local governments that are not currently subject to other revenue limits cannot collect property tax revenue above the amount that they collect in the prior year plus inflation. That's their new limit. If a local government exceeds this limit, it must refund any property tax revenue collected over the limit to taxpayers or lower its local tax rate, its mill levy for 1 year, or alternatively, they can have an election to get permission to keep and spend the money. There are exemptions from the new limits. School districts do not have this limit as a rule. This only applies to all the other local governments. And home rule jurisdictions are not subject to this limit because they are not subject to any of the current statutory limits, although they are subject to the Tabor limit on property tax revenue. There are many property tax revenues in the state law, so it's already complicated enough, it seems like. As I mentioned earlier, some revenue loss is due to property tax reductions if HH passes, and they'll be partially offset through reimbursements from the state. Based on the type of local government, the population of the county in which the local government's located, and growth of property values in the jurisdiction, reimbursements will hit a range of 65 to 100% of what the lost revenue is. Smaller counties and those with slower property value growth will generally receive higher reimbursement rates. School districts will be fully reimbursed through the public school funding formula using money retained by the state. So in summary, Proposition HH would provide some relief from increased property tax bills. It would fund schools and reimburse local governments using the state Tabor surplus up to the new HH revenue cap. And there is a change, it makes a change to the senior homestead exemption in the two ways that I mentioned before. And this concludes the League's summary of Proposition HH. I would like to mention there are some other resources that give some more detail that you can make use of. One is the Blue Book that you probably have received right now. They're not supposed to have sent it until, or it was guaranteed to be sent by October 6th, but I got mine last week, so maybe you did too. And the other thing is that the Legislative Council in the state has crafted a calculation tool, which is a website that you can go to enter some data like where you live, what your income is, what your property is worth, and the various, well, just the various jurisdictions that overlap you, the school district, et cetera. And it will calculate what your Tabor, the impact will be on your Tabor refund and your property tax bill as well. And I think, oops, I had it the wrong way. There's this QR code I can leave up there for a while, and that will take you to that website. So that's all I have.
There's quite a few questions, Geoff. The first one is, do we know what the education investments will look like?
Do we know what was the
educational investments will look like that you had mentioned at the beginning?
The educational investments?
Yeah, so the money that's supposed to go towards education in this?
No, the bill doesn't. I call it a bill. The measure doesn't keep it to a particular amount. It gives the state permission to keep and spend a certain amount of money each of the first 2 years, which I mentioned. I think 170 million in the first year and 360 million in the second year. And then the percentages that I mentioned about, well, the 20 million for rental assistance, the 20% for local government grants, and then all the rest goes to education. So that's the closest we can come to an amount, whatever that is. We don't know really how much the Tabor refund is going to be, or but we're limited to those revenue amounts. So it could be less than that, I think.
So how will renters be affected, since you just talked about renting? Well,
that's a little vague. There is a rental assistance program in the Division of Housing at the Department of Local Affairs that's been there for many years. And this $20 million off that comes out of this money would go to that program. And the theory is that some landlords will be raising their rent on account of their property taxes going up, and that this will help the renters offset that if there is a need.
So this is a more general question about initiatives and referendums. Is it only initiatives that are limited to one issue?
Well, that's a good question. They certainly are. But there is a single issue, the subject issue that I think is imposed upon the legislature. You're talking about state referenda,
right?
I think there is also a single subject imposition on the legislature, and that's why the title of this is so brief, because it just says it's property tax and allowing to keep and spend money. But as you've heard, it's got a lot of stuff in it. So it's all property tax related, I guess, except for the expenditure of the money.
So this is a summary question. Will low-income individuals, families come out ahead or behind? What's the bottom line on that? Do we have an idea?
these brief mentions that I made of the Tabor refund and the property tax changes are designed to help lower income people over higher income people. And that's the simple answer. You could see that in the charts that I flashed up that went by probably too quickly. I don't know.
So I'm very confused as to the motivation of this bill. I see conflicts as to who it helps in the end. What are the unintended consequences? Do we know the unintended consequences?
No, I don't. I'm a little vague on some of the intended consequences, to tell you the truth, but the unintended ones I can't get to. I can tell you that. Now, what was the first part of the question? I'm sorry again.
Oh, sure, no problem. The motivation of the bill.
Yeah, the motivation. Well, there are a few things going on. First of all, if you own a property that's taxed in Colorado, in early May, you received a notice of value from the county assessor. And immediately everybody knew, and the people, the assessors and the people that work in this field knew that this was coming, but everybody was up in arms about the fact that the property, my house went up 38%, and that was about an average. I think the average statewide was about 40%. And so everybody was upset that their property taxes are going to go up 40%. And while that's not the case, because property tax is there are three kinds of taxes. There's a tax on what you buy, you can pay a sales tax. There's a tax on what you earn, and it's an income tax. And this is what you own is a property tax. And the property tax is different than the other two because the calculation to figure out these taxes is simple enough. You take something and multiply it by a tax and you get the tax you have to pay. The other two taxes are fairly static. The rate of tax is fairly constant, and the amount of the thing that's being taxed is something that you're aware of. But in property tax, all three variables change every year. And so if local governments, since there is a limit on the amount of revenue that local governments can collect in property taxes, which is simply the sum of everybody's tax bill in their jurisdiction, then their mill levy has to go down if it's going to cause them to go over a revenue limit that's imposed on them. Does that make sense? Without a blackboard, it's kind of hard. I'm sort of trying to imagine a whiteboard here, blackboard or whiteboard. So I don't know if that helps or not.
I think it does. I just want to mention there's lots of actual chat in the chat, going back and forth and pointing out things. So please read those as well. Another question though, there's already an eviction increase. Does this really help keep people in their homes? There's
already an eviction increase.
Yes.
Can I put that on hold for a second? And
Sure.
I'm sorry, I got so far into the last one. I forgot to mention the other motivation for this measure. And that is that there is a ballot measure that has been circulated for signatures and is being checked for sufficiency in signatures right now by the Secretary of State. That's being called Measure 50. It's going to have a different number if it makes it on the ballot, and everybody expects that it will. And it would impose a very simple and austere limit on the whole property tax system. If it passes, it will be if it has sufficient signatures, it'll be on the 24 ballot. And it is similar to Proposition 13 in California, which has created, if you're familiar at all with California property tax system, it created a very strange situation out there. And that one came in the early 70s. But most people around the whole country think that our Tabor is very austere and strange, but California's property tax one is worse than the stuff in Tabor. So that was another motivation. I think this was probably trying to take care of this, try to take care of some of the problems that the incredible increase in value over the last few years has might cause next year on the property tax bills, and forestall maybe people wanting to change them again next year on the ballot. Now I'm sorry, back to your next question again. You asked once.
Does this really keep people in their homes?
I don't think so. I don't think it will. I mean, it's possible that the rental assistance program can. I'm not really very familiar with that situation. But as far as the property tax direct, the direct part of this on property taxes for homeowners, I think it's a minimal change. But I think we have to remember also that these revenue limits on local governments are still there. And just because your house went up 40% in value doesn't mean your taxes are going to go up 40%.
Cindy had a question specific to Denver. So Denver debruced property taxes a few years back, and the rate of increase was limited to help the sting of the increase. But Denver's able to save for a rainy day. How does this affect the increase in Denver?
Well, I can't answer that directly. I haven't spoken to the people in Denver about what they're expecting, but I would imagine that they are going to budget carefully and not levy any more property taxes than they need to balance their budget. So I would imagine that if by the term debrucing is not a legal term that people use. It just means that there was an election to affect some Tabor limit. And so some Tabor ballot questions say one thing and some another, and they're kind of all over the board. But if the debrucing measure allowed them to go up to a certain mill levy, then that'll still be in effect. But it also allows them to levy less than that. And I'm sure that they'll be judicious about it. That's my opinion, at least.
So again, as I said, there's lots of comments and places to look for more information in the chat. Do we have other questions, or did I miss someone's questions?
Okay.
It's very complicated, this HH.
There's a lot in it. There's a lot in it. And this is an oversimplification, really. I mean, it's very dense. Lots of numbers.
Jackie asked if the recording will be available, and it will. It'll be on our website.
Okay. Check out that calculation tool online if you can find. I mean, it's not a very complicated website, and it's up there on the screen.
Was
Jeanette?
was this measure developed by a large group of people or kind of medium? And how long did they work on it? Do you happen to know?
I don't really know. I've spoken to some of the people that worked on it. I know that the governor worked on it, and members of the Joint Budget Committee in the legislature, and the people at the Division of Property Taxation in the Department of Local Affairs all worked on it. And they worked hard on it. I mean, there's a lot in this bill. If you go online at the legislative website and go find that it's Senate Bill 303, just like our area code. So if you can find that and just kind of glance through it, and I think you can appreciate that there was a good deal of calculation and thought that went into it. But I really don't know all of the discussions, and I don't know most of the people. I don't even know who all the group was that put it together. They worked on it for months, though.
Mm-hmm.
So a late question here. Won't both renters and property owners benefit from additional funds to schools, support for fire safety, etc.?
Yes, I think so. They'll benefit on not on any of those agencies not having to cut their services. So I think the idea is that those local governments can provide a level of service that their citizens have become used to and not have to worry about cutting them.
So then another question about who's supporting or campaigning against or for HH.
Well, there are some. I should have gotten the list of the fors and against before tonight. I didn't think of it. I'm sorry about that. They're on the Secretary of State's website, and I could have done that, but they're on some of the state league's materials on this too. I think they have a pamphlet about HH that I think lists the for and against agencies.
One of the people in chat said that Bell Policy and Colorado Fiscal Institute are for HH.
Yes, there are two of the agencies that think it's a good thing.
Okay, I think that might be the end of questions. Final call.
Lots of good questions. Thank you.
Lisa, are you going to, Lisa or Sue? And
Can you see my screen? I'm back again. Okay.
Yes,
Thank you,
perfect.
Geoff. And thank you, Liz. I really appreciate you both presenting. And we have gone through the questions. But the last topic was a great segue into the ballot guides that League of Women Voters puts together. We do have hard copies, and I'll just show them here in my camera. This darker blue one is from the State League, and this one is from the Denver League. So this covers HH and II, and this covers Measure 2P. The last item on this slide, if you want hard copies like I just showed you, you can send a request to this email, which is the office of the League of Women Denver group. And then also I wanted everybody to know about websites. The second two here, the League of Women Denver and League of Women Colorado, they have pretty much the same information that Liz and Geoff presented this evening. And then after October 9th, both the local and the state information will be available on the Vote 411 website. And for those who are not familiar with that, it's pretty handy because it serves the nation as a whole. So no matter what state you live in, you can go to Vote 411 and get the information. And also on that website, not only will be these ballot the ballot information, but also League of Women Voters partners with Channel 8 and Inter-Neighborhood Group Association, and they are hosting debates for the school board, and those will be recordings of those will also be posted to the Vote 411 website. And just to go through quickly here, I'm not going to read all these slides, but you know, to be qualified to be a voter, you need to be a citizen. You have to have lived in the state 22 days. You have to be 18 years old. And for someone who hasn't registered for the first time, there's a variety of ways to do that. By mail, at a driver's license facility, through a voter registration drive, or up to 8 days before the election, you can register online with the Secretary of State. Or after that, after the 8 days are up, you can register in person anytime at a county clerk's office or a voter service center, up to and including election day. So a reminder, I think ballots go out around October 16th, and you can return your ballot by mail, or there's lots of drop-off locations around the Denver area. And it's important to make sure if you mail it, it'll be received by, or if you put in a box, it'll be delivered by Election Day, which this year is Tuesday, November 7th at 7 p.m. So I'm going to hand it back to Sue.
So I'm going to put in a plug for a wonderful fundraiser that we are having, which is also a celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month. This is on October 7th, this Saturday at 2:00 at Montview Presbyterian Church. We're going to host the phenomenal Artístico Folclórico dancers who perform traditional Mexican folk dances, and also Virginia Sanchez, a Latina author discussing the hundreds of years of cultural and political influence of Hispanic people in our part of the Southwestern United States. Latino treats will also be served. Please go to the League of Women Voters website. You will find this screen that you're seeing. And if you click on the upper right corner where it says register now, you can purchase tickets. Secondly, I want to again thank the voter service team, to thank Lisa Haddix, and to thank Lis Brown and Geoff Withers for a great presentation tonight. What wasn't asked in the question and answer was, where does League stand? And we decided to make this presentation tonight, in part because we're nonpartisan, even though this presentation doesn't have anything to do with particular candidates. We do take positions in support of or opposing legislation, and those positions can be found at the Denver website, League of Women Voters Denver.org, or the Colorado website for State League, League of Women Voters Colorado.org. And we wanted just to focus on the voter education side of these ballots tonight. But if you're curious about where League stands on HHII or 2P, feel free to go to those websites. And they're wonderful websites for lots of other things too. Mm-hmm. So in conclusion, I would just like to say, I hope we see many of you again on October 17th for our next briefing. Which is in person and will be at Montview Presbyterian Church at Dahlia. And that will be on ranked choice voting. And I will say that about alternative voting methods, League of Women Voters of Denver and Colorado and nationally have a stand supporting alternative voting methods. So I want to thank everyone who came tonight. I'm delighted that CSLC members and League of Women Voters members were able to work together, pose questions, make a thoughtful response to both HHII and 2P. We may do more of these joint partnering on various briefings and ballot issues. So take care. If you're driving somewhere, it's still light outside. That's an advantage to starting at 5 instead of 5:30. And thank you for attending our program tonight.